Welcome, everyone. This is Larry Johnson, your host for another episode of Eight Principles Voices. And I'm delighted to have with me a man by the name of Ranjib Sarma today. And Ranjib, aside from a lot of other things that he does that are pretty exciting, and you're going to hear about them, he's also one of our own, so to speak. He's an Eight Principles Fellow, an Eight Principles Coach, and he's in Delhi, India, a long way away from Boise, Idaho. But I met Ranjib when I was there last year, and I've really enjoyed getting to know him and the other gentlemen and ladies that I met when I was there. Welcome, Ranjib.
Thanks, Larry. It's been a pleasure.
So, Ranjib, you're an interesting fellow. And what I mean by that is you have a background in the for-profit space. You're very successful in that regard. And over time, you've developed an interest in philanthropy and and in the nonprofit world, which actually led you to eventually become involved with us, the Eight Principles. Tell us a little bit about your background, perhaps how you were trained, university, whatever, and then some of the things you've learned over the way, and then how that's migrated toward the nonprofit world.
Sure, Larry. Uh, in fact, if I look back and look back my whole life, uh, it's a journey, and a lot of it, you could say, serendipity, because I belong to a typical Indian family who had aspirations. For example, my dad was a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor, and everybody wanted me to be a doctor. So, and I got it in myself that no, I have to be a doctor, and that's why I ended up doing my honors in major in zoology, animal science, and then I tried for the medical school. I couldn't clear the tests to get into a medical school.
So tell me, Ranjiv,
Then I ended up.
is it like
Mhm.
here in the US where the killer course is organic chemistry?
Yes, you can say that again. I mean, I think organic chemistry is something which is so interesting, but you have to do a lot of cramming, So that actually makes it so difficult.
Mhm.
And so what happened was, after my graduation, I continued to believe in myself that okay, I'm going to be a doctor. So I actually joined a pharmaceutical company selling medicine. But then one fine day I realized, no, it's not gonna for me. And then I decided to shift because then I met some people and they said, okay, you are naturally a people's person. You connect with people. Why don't you join a course in sales? So I ended up doing, my course in sales and marketing. Did my postgraduate diploma in that, and but one of the courses, of course, Philip Kotler was there when you read about marketing. But one of the courses they had, they used to call as it was actually developed by Hutwait Group, and it used to be called as Spin, and which actually talks about suspect, prospect, need, payoff, implications. So that's you how do you actually create a need, and then how marketing is a need, and sales is how you convert need into cash. And within that, there was a course I chanced upon, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. That
Stephen
actually
Covey.
gave me a very interesting, absolutely. I mean, I think that was way back in 98,
Mhm.
99, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's where I think there was a change in my journey because we were in workshops and we had, planned workshops for people, experienced CEOs, other people. A lot of them, when they talked about paradigm shifts, a lot of them they talked about begin with the end in mind. I saw them literally break down, and when they say, okay, fine, I have been working all my life to provide for my family, but after a point of time, when it was time for me to retire, I look back, I think my family had moved on because when they needed me, I was not there. So those actually kind of brought me thinking that exactly maybe there needs to be a purpose in life, and that's where I think I got the opportunity to actually volunteer in organizations like Amnesty International. So it was way back, and there I got inspired to pick up my law degree, and also I did a master's in human rights. And I said, okay, fine. How do we make the change? So I thought, why don't I become, because I have the sales, I have the corporate background, I have done my MBA, and also I have got some voluntary experience. Maybe if I become part of a system, maybe I get to change the world. So that's when Walmart happened.
Okay.
Then of course, it's a long story, and I think
Yes.
today, it has been a continuous journey of learning new things, and until I chanced upon meeting you and the eight principles, and something connected again, because again it's a mission, and
Yes.
yeah, here I am.
All right. Well, I know that we had the connection with Stephen Covey. I went to Covey School back in that same time period, 97, 98. I had the
Hmm.
pleasure of meeting Mr. Covey twice because I went to Salt Lake, well, Utah, where they do the training. And that's where I learned not only, his approach, he's focusing on really values and principles rather than techniques, and on changing your point of view, your paradigm. And then what I learned from them, Ranjib, was, and this having participated, is the Covey people had done a lot of research into how adults learn, which is very different from a traditional student. And it's very interactive. Adults learn by doing things and by reading, not by listening. Um, and so I was very impressed with their program, the way they constructed it. And so that kind of stuck in the back of my head. And later on is when I left higher ed and then formed the eight principles, then I really drew on my experience with Covey. Well, if you can do this for leadership, you can do it for fundraising. It's the same approach. And like Covey, it's both presentable to an outside audience, but it's also can be embedded in an organization as well, where you get that continual learning. One thing that I've discovered, I wonder if this is, of course, we know this to be the same truth in India. The whole idea of an implantable platform, what is the term is continuous learning in a for-profit business is pretty, I mean, that's very well known. Businesses do that all the time. And if they find it to be more effective, it's more permanent, and it's all more cost effective. So, and yet, Ranjib, is we've reached out and introduced this concept, and it is an introduction to the nonprofit world. It's totally foreign to them. Now, in this country, even um, they get their training, whatever they get, which isn't much usually, through an occasional conference, or they'll send somebody to a short course, or they'll have a consultant come in temporarily. It's very hit and miss, so that the real lasting benefit is pretty small, and sometimes there's no change at all. So then you've been on this journey. Then you met us when I was there in India. By the way, Delhi is a beautiful city. I enjoyed being there very much. Um, and the Indian people are lovely people. And I'm looking forward to going back. I felt so warm and welcome the whole time I was there. Um, and but now that we've done this, and then you met me, and you introduced to the eight principles, um, you signed on to be a fellow, you're certified now. What's next?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. In fact, until I met you, I think I had just off-boarded my corporate career, and my last work involved, being on the other side. So because you must be aware that in India we have a law by virtue of amendment to the Companies Act, which is called the CSR law.
Mhm.
And interestingly, if you look at India, I mean, there are certain companies who had always been at that space, like the Tata Group, for example. I think if you talk about CSR and JRD Tata, maybe his predecessor, I think they had introduced the concept way back in 1800s. So on one hand, that what we have, and the second, on the other hand, we have, like you described, organizations who take it as they go, you know, and eventually it's a hit or a miss, and then but essentially it was always philanthropy. But the CSR law kind of changed the game. In fact, prior to joining my last company, it's a UK-based specialty retailer. I was also in the developmental sector, and it's a Netherlands-based organization. I was the head of programs for South and Southeast Asia, looking at the cotton and the textile supply chain. Interestingly, I think I'm talking about 2011. The approach to uh, fundraising was pretty similar to what you see the organizations who are not that trained. It was something related to, okay, you get a proposal, but one thing was very interesting, that Netherlands organization, they always used to, like, bank upon, and that's the interesting part, because that's where I could relate when I actually started learning the AIDS principles and joined you. That gentleman, he started with 20,000 euros. Today, it's around 35 million euros. And his way of, he wouldn't check and say, okay, fine, let's apply to USAID, or let's apply to ILO, let's apply to this fund or that fund. It was always relationships. For example, a 12 million euro program which we had started in Bangladesh, it
Yes.
was just because of the goodwill of the Bangladeshi uh, ambassador. He was not a Bangladeshi ambassador, the Netherlands ambassador based out of Bangladesh. So the Netherlands embassy was actually doing it. So all they did was, like, tick those boxes in terms of relationship management, but also align the country's views. For example, Netherlands is a country which is which is actually existing on reclaiming of land from water. It's got a big water problem. It is below the water level. So there's
Yes.
always this. And same goes for Bangladesh. All he did was had those relationship and connected it to the water issue in Bangladesh. And then of course you could actually connect the other things. So anyway, so when I joined my last company as a donor, so I was really inspired by, okay, fine. Although the CSR law is very clear in India that you cannot use your funds for your company, but I was very clear that somewhere I think the company needs to get benefited in a way that also that because it's a company's footprint, and how do we actually address the issue of footprint? For example, if I'm a big sourcing company selling clothes in UK, obviously I will have a footprint. For example, in terms of my water footprint or my soil footprint, my human rights footprint. Indirectly, I have to manage a big supply base. So that was the perspective. So 8 years I gave and gained a lot of insights. Then I thought I'm ready, and now it's time to actually give it back. Because when I was dealing with the non-profits, like you said, I think some of them, they just came. It was, I think that the pitch was always, okay, this is what we do, and this is what we can do, and this is our expertise. And I couldn't relate to it.
Mhm.
So the whole thing about your principles, donors are the drivers. I mean, I needed what for my company. Somehow I could not relate with a single organization except when the other people came in. So I think there was one organization, but then I was able to connect. That individual was really, I think, he's still in touch with me, and they call themselves as a local non-profit which has gone global. And the way, and that relationship is still with me. So I think there were things which I learned, and then of course, what my learning and how can I complement with eight principles. So as of now, of course, I'm in a transition phase. So obviously, I'm not on my own in totality, but to maintain the transition, I have taken two retainerships. Uh, Again, related to fundraising. So I thought, like, whatever I've learned,
Mhm.
and of course my experience, why don't I combine together and do something?
Let,
So that's where I am.
you mentioned something I want to draw attention to. Um,
Hmm.
that is, here you are, on the outside, you're inclined to support people philanthropically, you're inclined to be involved, you want to be involved, and then you describe your encounters with the typical not for profit. It's self focused, it's focused on them. You see, there's the key. They're not really paying attention to you or listening to you. And that's, of course, as
Yeah.
you know, a tenet of how we teach people is that the focus must be on the investor, what I call a donor. All right. And that understanding what their needs are and what it is they're looking for in a return, which is intangible yet very important at the same time. And that when you, I like to say, get over yourself and then really focus on the investor. We talked about it's really two parties coming together to accomplish something that really neither can do alone, you see. But that's the thing that you've already pinpointed that limits so many not-for-profit organizations, is that they have such an intense self-focus. And and it's honorable, but they have to remember they're in a team situation. And it's not a matter of, oh, I'm doing such a great job, I deserve your money. uh, that's not what this is about. And so you pointed that out, and I wanted to really draw, and that's the same we have in this country too. And so now that you're now, so going forward, what do you think you're going to be doing with being a fellow, a coach? You're going to go into business for yourself? You're going to work for a nonprofit? What do you think you're going to do?
So I think I'm enjoying the space actually, and it gives me the flexibility. As I shared that I have already taken up two retainership
Mhm.
again, which is related to fundraising, and also, like, it gives me some opportunity to also use my expertise and the skill sets which I've developed. I think everything is connected at one point or other. In
Mhm.
fact, yesterday another organization approached me, and they said, we need somebody to advise in terms of our fundraising. The problem, as you said, and you are so right here, that people take fundraising as one of the activity, and they do not connect it to the ultimate, I think, delivery of what that activity should actually do, so that it can continue. So what happens, it becomes a one time wonder. So you get maybe 45 million from Walmart as donation, and then once the program, because you did such a shabby job, and so many times I have seen there is no correlation between the finance team, the fundraising team, the proposal writing team. you know everybody is in a disarray. And this actually brings me to that wonderful concept I learned. I think you liked it, right? I mean, when we talked about the word advisor for life,
Mhm. Oh,
um,
I love that.
that was fantastic, and that was something I think the Japanese, they created. And uh, and then the whole concept of moments of truth, they play such a bigger role. And that's why in the coming world, I think the ability to relate would actually play a very important role as compared to what the current organizations they do, which they only rely from a perspective of technical. Because see, you have AI now. I mean, you do not need proposal writers where, right? I think the idea is that you need people who have ideas, people who can then maybe put across the ideas. And then the other thing I also saw, Larry, in the non-profits was there's a disconnect between the people who are in the board and the people who are actually working. So that sense of belonging is missing. The board of directors, okay, we have set this up, we have hired experts, but there's no involvement. So I want to actually be in this space supporting this organization because they're out there. There are a lot of people, and especially in India, there are a lot of grassroots organizations, Larry.
There are.
They are doing fantastic work, but somehow they don't end up getting projects. They don't end up getting work. So they end up doing subcontracted works.
Mm.
Maybe as a brand, maybe, they think, okay, it's good to be associated with a larger, not for profit, but again, the work is always being subcontracted to somebody smaller, and the actual work is done by them.
Mhm.
The idea is how can we empower those people? Because then once we empower them, they would be able to do a better job,
You know,
because a bigger organization would have a problem.
there, and I don't remember the names, but when I was in Mumbai, we were taken one day. Well, we went for like 2 or 3 days, but up into I think it was north of Mumbai, and there was, well, what I'm trying to say, a lot of these smaller organizations are the idea of one or two people, and they're driving this. Maybe it's a family. And in this one situation that I met when I went up north of Mumbai, was this what was sort of, it was an older woman, and she had a couple of other people involved, and it was a foundation, a nonprofit, and I got to see the classroom and everything where they were training tribal girls to have a skill, to be nurses assistants specifically, and they would come down and work and then go back, and that was, to these girls, that was a lifeline. That was a whole different way of living, a whole opening door. And and then her son was the one that brought us there, and he was saying to me, but well, how do we attract other people that are interested in this? And he couldn't quite get it. And so we spent about 2 hours with them describing, no, don't look at it this way, look at it this way, you see. And it was amazing, Ranjiv, just by changing his mental outlook. And this was a pretty smart young man. He was an entrepreneur. He has his own kind of eco-tourist organization. But when it came to enlisting philanthropic support, he was clueless. Like, how do I do this? Well, all it took was like, okay, look at it not this way, but this way. Oh. Oh, yes, you can make connections. You know who these people are. You do it in a different way here, as opposed to kind of the people out there. You bring them closer to you. And so you're saying the very same thing, is that it's a change in perspective and what you're doing, and that there are lots of grassroots organizations that would benefit from this. And you've also mentioned several times, and I want to draw attention to this. You see it in India, perhaps more than you see it in this country, but you still see it here, where people go after philanthropic support from what I call the usual suspects, the big people outside here, the corporate interests, the foundations that are way out here, that have a lot of people banging on their doors, instead of what we teach, as you know, starting from the inside and working out, and that more people than you really think you do. All right. So
So
uh, that's yeah, I like that very, very much. Thank you for reminding me of that. And that was a wonderful thing. You go there and you see these girls, their whole lives are being transformed by this. Um, and they were doing it on a shoestring.
I agree. In fact, and then I'd like to add something there, Larry. I mean, there is one thing about changing people's life, and then it is so heartwarming looking at these girls, seeing them change. Uh, the other thing we need to look at is also the ecosystem. Uh, you know, at the risk of repeating myself, but what I've also observed when I actually was holding the chair of, donating or maybe granting, giving those grants, one of the things I, to my dismay, learned that, you do a program, you look at its impact, and you come up with a beautiful report. And then that's the end of the story.
Mhm.
So the question is, when we look at a system, so for example, because I have been working in lot on the supply chain risk, let's say. So you train people, let's say on women empowerment. Okay, you train those girls, we bring them to the stage, parade them. Okay, they say, oh, my life had changed, I'm so happy. But after that, 1 year down the line, okay, I have a number of, let's say, 35,000 people trained. I go back looking for those 35,000 people. Maybe after a year, they're gone. And suddenly, the place where the training happened, the issues remain the same. So, is there an opportunity for us to also, maybe I know it's not an issue of fundraising, but it can be connected, because continuing that relationship.
Mhm.
So one way is, okay, fine, okay, you train one batch, you continue that relationship, train more people, or be smart about it. Look at the infrastructural approach. Like, somebody gave a very interesting example about, there was a place in northeast of India, and there were a lot of student dropouts.
Yes.
So these people, they came up with a very innovative idea. They said, okay, fine, instead of investing money in the buildings, okay, you do it once, but why don't we actually invest money on the students? So let's say a grade 7 student, if that student is actually empowered, because when we they went in and they understood why there was a dropout, because the poorer sections of the society, they needed the money, right? And then they needed extra helping hands in their households. So they said, okay, fine, why don't we, instead of, like, giving money, much money to the teachers, okay, teachers are there, but then the students also play a role of teaching their junior grades, and for their time they get paid. So
Yes.
part of the grant was actually used there, and suddenly the dropout rates dramatically came down. Similarly, I think we have to look at innovative approaches. But the problem is, and this is again, like, and this is my appeal to maybe a lot of those non-profits out there. When you give a solution, there are situations when maybe a non-profit decides to give, they have the whole holistic solution. But
Mhm.
what happens is, when they give a solution, they give part of the solution. So what happens is, so maybe one part is given to one donor, the other part is given to another donor. Can we look at a consortium approach? And if we look at, maybe looking at, how do we change the ecosystem so that the issues do not come in, and then we do not spend all our energy in solving the same issue again and again and again and again. And the other issues, they take a back seat.
You know, you pointed to something out very clearly. You both, in terms of the fund development piece, it's developing that sustainability, but it's also in the delivery piece of what you've just been describing, and developing that sustainability, and the two working together. There again, it all boils down to relationships,
So
relationships that are bilateral. It's not, they're not unilateral. And then I want to go back to Advisor for Life. I know when you said that to me, it really stuck. Advisor for Life. You know, if a not for profit can say, "Oh, I'm your advisor for life," in terms of you're been so generous to give to me and to give to our organization. Um, I want to be your advisor. How can I help you grow closer to my organization? How can I help you fulfill more of what your dreams are? And be that attentive person. Um, I guarantee you, any organization in this country, and I'm sure in India as well, that could accomplish that would have no dearth of people lining up to be a part of this. The expression I use is if you can create an experience or experiences that your investors slash donors can't purchase, they will literally throw money at you, because it is so uncommon, it is so rare, and it's that, whoa, I'll come back, I'll do this again and again and again if I get that kind of treatment. um it really is. So Ranjib, I asked you before, but I'm going to ask you again. Now you're already beginning to have some people approach you wanting you to help them with the development programs. So you think you're going to stay in the coaching consulting space then, as opposed to attaching yourself to one particular organization?
For now, yeah, it looks interesting. Maybe when I have more experience, who knows,
Hmm.
and maybe, because I'm just keeping it very, very open at this moment. It's just been how many? 1 year or
Yeah.
22 I left. So yeah, 1 or 2 years. So maybe because this is another experience, Larry, and being in this space, interacting with other organizations, and then looking at solution centric approaches. Um, and when that comes in, and then, the other thing also, I mean, again, I mean, a interesting thought crossed my mind when you talked about this whole connecting this advisor for life thing with nonprofits. One of the things which I see in most nonprofits is after a point of time when revenue becomes the target. So you suddenly join the rat race. Suddenly you become very mechanical,
Yes.
turning proposals after proposals after proposal. So what happens is, in certain cases, you end up ignoring some of your genuine donors. Maybe they might include the people who had first come into your aid, with whom you had started. So also the quality suffers because end of the day, fundraising, as I would like to reiterate, it's not about taking up, a proposal, submitting a proposal, getting the grant, and oh, okay, next, get into the next proposal. But it's about seeing it through. And then every time there's an issue, just like, you're gonna go up, buy a car, you buy the car from that person who is your advisor. You buy the insurance from that person, the car insurance. You buy, he becomes your point of contact if you get stuck, especially when you're doing your service. And then after a period of time, when you are ready to upgrade to the next level, he's the one who's gonna like advise you. Okay, maybe this is the, looking at what you have been doing, this is your next model to look for. Similarly, I think in the nonprofit space also, there are opportunities where the same organization could actually be a go-to solution provider. So so it becomes a win-win for everyone.
It does. Oh, I love that. I just love that. So um, it's the nonprofits becoming so proactive, they're anticipating the next thing you'll want to do.
Yeah,
And and they're focused on you and your investments. Now, that requires a pretty enlightened organizational leadership, Ranjiv. Um, it really does. One of the things, and I wonder, I'm going to ask you if you think it's the same in India. One of the challenges we face here in the U.S. is you mentioned earlier that people see fundraising as some sort of separate activity off to the side, and we see that as well, where it's okay, we're kind of doing this over here, and we just kind of spit the money out as it comes and use it. Um, Instead of that, making it more integrated and really focusing on the donor. Um, One of the things that we think is limiting that change is that unlike a business where there's a quote bottom line and there is a profit motive, and it's integral to the business. You've got to make those numbers in some reasonable way or you won't be around too long. All right, that since there's no profit motive or revenue motive in the nonprofits, it's difficult for them to adopt an understanding of the primacy of the donors. Do you see that in India as well?
I see that a lot. I think at some level, I think humans are very similar. And even I think if you talk about the for-profit organizations, like for example, every organization, when it is established, I think there is a vision, right?
Mhm.
If I start a business, even if it's a for-profit vision, there would be certain codes I would decide and define, which reflect maybe my personal way of doing things. For example, if I'm a thug, obviously my focus would be, and it's not gonna last long. But if you want to create a great company like Tata or a Gap Inc., for example, or a Levi's or a Patagonia, I'm just giving some names, throwing out those. It's very important to have that vision, and down the line, the employees, they need to actually, like, maybe live that vision. That actually continues and ensures the success of that organization.
That's
And the
exactly,
moment,
yeah, that is exactly what we're trying to do by putting an A principles understanding inside of an organization. And you
hmm,
mentioned Tata, this huge conglomerate. They're into airlines, they're into vehicles, they do it all right. And I flew in one of their airlines, by the way. I have a little story I'll tell you about that. You probably don't know this, but uh, what I didn't know, that in terms of cumulative giving, Mr. Tata, the original Mr. Tata, is still the world's most generous philanthropist. I mean,
yeah,
he makes Bill Gates look like a piker by comparison. And I knew nothing about that. Let me tell you a little story, Ranjib. It really impressed me. We were coming to Delhi, and we were flying out of Bangalore that morning. And Sachin was a superb organizer. He always had us out at the crack of dawn, very first flight. Got to make it to the airport. And so we're there in plenty of time, and we're having breakfast at one of the cafes very close to the gate where we're going to be leaving. It's just like, just kind of behind my shoulder there. And I'm just placing myself at their disposal. They'll tell me where to go and what to do. And I had Ravi Nair with me, and then I had Ed Hughes with me. And so we're having breakfast, and I love this. What's it called? It's a certain kind of coffee they serve in the clay cups. And I never had, I really enjoyed it. And I'm a black coffee guy, but I really enjoy this. And Ravi and Ed got up to kind of wander toward the gate. And I said, well, Sachin, do we have, oh yeah, we got plenty of time, plenty of time. And just enjoy your coffee. Now the gate was behind me, and Sachin would say, well, he got up at one point, then came back. Well, and I said, okay, well, I'm done now. We can, and I'm thinking, well, we better get heading to the gate. Oh yeah, we got plenty of time. We walk over there, Ranjit. The departure lounge is empty. The sign says door closing. And I'm going, holy, like, in this country, like, forget it. You're not getting on. So we walk up. He'd already talked to the gate agent. The man says to me, did you enjoy your coffee, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Larry? And yes, I did. Thank you very much. And he does this for me. And then we walk. We're the very last people to get on that plane. They close the door as soon as we move on. We get on the plane, and Ravi and Ed are going, where were you guys? We've been waiting for you. Where are you? You know, that to me is so the real hospitality that I incurred when I was there. There's an allowance for doing things a little differently. You don't get caught up in just the mechanics every single time. Sure, you gotta get it done. Sure, you gotta move on. But it wasn't like we were really holding anybody up, but still they kind of bent the rules a little bit, and it got on and we got off. And so yeah. uh, um, yeah, and that was in Bangalore in the morning, and then we flew to Delhi that day. But this has been delightful, Ranjib. We'll do this again. And my question to you now is there anything that you'd like to add that we've not discussed?
I think we did touch upon, quite a lot of subjects, and interestingly, they do align with what eight principles stand for. And the other thing, just I wanted to put here on the table was my uh, interaction with a gentleman who was the founder of an organization called Emerging Leaders. So I mean, I'm amazed. I think how Stephen Covey's principles, they actually, they got radiated through so many different ideas. And this was something which, when I was in my last corporate job, and they wanted to bring leadership, which was there, which was a privy for the people in the boardroom, to the bottom of the pyramid. And here we were giving them, and then a very interesting thing they talked about was there are principles which are maybe 3,000 years old. You cannot patent them, like proactiveness. I mean, this is something which is out there, right?
Yes, it doesn't change.
And when you bring those principles down to those people, and you won't believe it, Larry, I think we implemented with the garment workers, women workers. Oh my God. And then the core of the principle was that, you are a leader. And even if you are being led by somebody else, but individually. And then, the program ended with projects for those people. And amazingly, they came up with such beautiful projects. One of them went to the extent of, repairing potholes in Bangalore.
There,
Somebody took up
there are
amazing.
plenty of those, by the way. I
Exactly.
experienced them. There are
Yeah,
plenty.
exactly. So I think human behavior. So I think the time has come. Uh, we have to talk about the practicalities. We have to go back to the basics. I think the brass tracks, and harness the potential of human, I think, behavior, uh, which for some reason we have actually got them clouded. And there are amazing people out there who can actually make the difference.
You mentioned that the universality of human nature, as
Yeah,
opposed to, the implementation of the technique may vary, but the principle remains the same. And this has
exactly.
been, my message when I was first approached about bringing the 8 principles to India. And I asked Sachin, so how's this going to work? And so then he began to describe it to me. But that, we're teaching people principles, and then the techniques will vary. For instance, one thing I learned from Sachin and from others is there's really no direct mail fundraising in India. Uh, Direct mail is a very big thing here, but they do it differently. They accomplish the same thing, but they do it through a different channel. And so, but the principles, how you engage people, how you respond to people, how you maintain the relationship, those are the same. Um, Thank you, Ranjiv, and very much. Um,
Okay.
uh, Everyone, we've been having a delightful conversation with Ranjiv Sarma today, who is communicating with me from Delhi, a lovely city in India. He is a newly minted 8 Principles coach and fellow, and I thank him for coming today. Very soon will be another episode with another leader in the humanitarian space.